Team, how are we? Welcome back to another episode of the High Performance Coach podcast. I hope all is good in your world today. I have another phenomenal human that is sat in front of me, somebody that I had the pleasure of wining and dining a few months ago back in Belfast. Funnily enough, the first ever time that we have met. I've been following David for a long period of time in terms of the amazing work he's been doing with his coaching company. And that was the first chance we got the opportunity to be in a room with one another, have some dinner, and spend some good quality time together, which was absolutely amazing. I'm really looking forward to unpacking some gems, some wisdom across personal life and also business, which is going to be great. So, Mr. Hatt, welcome to the High Performance Coach podcast. How are you, sir?
Thank you so much, mate. I'm very well. I definitely owe you for that meal. It was phenomenal. So the next one's on me, mate.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Dude, what do you believe are some of the key ingredients that makes you, you?
God, straight in there with a big question. Key ingredients. I think this could be conceived as a bad thing as well, but never been satisfied. I think that's a big part of me, and again, I think it's led to a lot of growth, but I also think it's led to a lot of, like, I suppose, periods of unhappiness, as in you've achieved something and it's like, what's next? I think that's a big part of me. I'm very much I'm goal orientated, I'm goal driven, I'm always looking for progress, but probably in a negative way. Sometimes don't appreciate what I've got at times. I think that's a big kind of part of me to an extent. Outside of that, what makes me me? Do you know what? Like, I'm not too serious. I think one of our kind of core values with MTN, with our company, is serious results, not so serious people. I'm always up for a little bit of bullshit. It's never, as much as the brand's grown and the company's grown, I never want to have that, like, corporate feel. I always want it to have a little bit more of a kind of, I don't want to use the word fun, it's a bit cliche, but like fun, laid back feel. Like, results for us doesn't need to be this, hardcore fucking, bodybuilding in the trenches. That's a lot of me. Like, I'm always up for shooting the shit, having a little bit of a laugh as well.
Where do you think not being satisfied comes from?
Probably sport when I was younger. I done sport karate for 15 years, used to compete all over Europe. So, and to be honest, I actually never really accomplished what I wanted to in that field. Like, I was Scottish champion and second in Britain, but I never got a British first place, and I never qualified for European things. So probably an element of not achieving what I wanted to when I was younger, and being really dissatisfied with that. It was like, it was the wrong sport for me in a sense. Like, I chose a sport that I wasn't actually that good at. Naturally, I just was quite fit and athletic, and that kind of carried me forward, but I didn't have necessarily the natural talents or skills to excel there. So then when I kind of transferred that hunger into business, I was like, oh, this is like solely on me now. I can always, there's always somewhere to progress in business, I feel. And I think that probably the dissatisfaction from not achieving what I wanted to in my youth led to probably more dissatisfaction as I got older. So yeah.
Yeah, mate, I hear you 100%. And in your mind, that kind of not feeling satisfied, how do you think that serves you well?
I think, as much as I covered at the start, it could be a positive and a negative. I think it's more net positive, I would have said. I feel like everything that I do is always to, we're big on, like, service improvements. We're big on customer service. I'm always big on, like, what can I do better for these people? How can I serve these people better? So it's not always just like self-fulfilling. Like, yes, I want to make more money. Yes, I want to have a better lifestyle for myself. But a lot of the things are like, how can we give more to our clients? So yeah, sometimes it's dissatisfaction with what I'm providing, even if we've had, really good reviews, really good compliments, testimonials. I'm always like, yeah, no, but why didn't this person say this as well? Why didn't, out of X amount of clients, why did only 80% say that they loved it? Why didn't 100%? So I think it served me, like, more net positive than I would say negative. Equally, there's always an element of, David, chill out, like, appreciate what you've got, appreciate where you are. And I certainly, like, have had moments where I struggle with that, and you kind of need to kind of pinch yourself and be like, okay, this is what you said you wanted 5 years ago. Appreciate it, like, right now. I'm bad for that.
A negative way, in what way do you think it doesn't serve you or doesn't support where you are?
Yeah, I think just the I don't want to say I'm ungrateful. I think I'm not someone that sits and writes out what I'm grateful for. I've never found that useful, really. But I'm not someone who, I don't pause and feel grateful for things until I have a period of, like, despair. So until I'm like, fuck, things aren't good, I'm like, right, think about what you're grateful for, think about what you're grateful for, and have that. I think that kind of doesn't serve me necessarily well. I don't necessarily appreciate things in the moment. It takes me a while to get past it before I then go, actually, that was a really good thing. Like you done good. Well done. So that probably doesn't serve me that well. I think I'd be better off trying to appreciate things a little bit more in the moment than having to reflect way back on them.
I think one of the biggest challenges that I can absolutely appreciate is like almost like standing where your feet are.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like allowing yourself to appreciate and acknowledge the position you're in and the life and the things that you currently have that you appreciate that your kind of 8-year-old, 10-year-old, or even like yourself from 2 years ago could have only ever dreamt of. But there's also at the same time, there's this like desire and drive and hunger and will and want to now be able to progress. And you now know that there's so much more that you're capable of that you want to be able to build. And it's great, but you're nowhere near where you've got the capacity and the capability to be. And being able to stand with your feet are, I think, can be one of the most challenging and hardest things to do when you're wired in the way that like you and I both are, because exactly as you said, it's a great strength because it's like, well, there's always work to be done. There's always more. There's a great driver and there's always this like appropriate curiosity.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, it's like, even though I was walking with Leanne yesterday, she's like, how can you allow yourself to appreciate and acknowledge where you are even more right now? And I'm like, really good question.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think, I mean, maybe a lot of people are like that. Maybe they need that element of reflection. I don't know how many people really live completely in the present. I think it's a really hard thing to do. Like I'm very much like live in the future. What's next? What's next? What's next? But I think, you know, some of the most happy and content people seem to live a little bit more in the present and appreciate things on a day-to-day basis. I think I tend to stack a lot of things and then go, okay, the last 2 years was quite good. Like, okay, fine, well done. And then it's like, cool, what's the next, 6, 12, 18 months look like? And then be like, right, let's get to work and push towards that.
I think it's always the anticipation of the thing. It's like the anticipation of now being able to, and again, as cliche as it sounds, it absolutely is the journey without a shadow. In your mind, what drives and fuels all of this?
I don't know because I've always struggled to, every motivational speaker you hear of, every person that's had any level of success, I feel like a lot of them have came from some insane trauma or they've had something really bad happen to them or there's been an element of that. And I know part of that's storytelling and I know part of that's to kind of sell the dream in the long-term journey. I don't have some sort of like sob story or horror story. I had a really good upbringing, had a really good childhood, a lot of good things happened. Like I'm sure there was tough things along the way as well, but I think just because you can, and therefore I think you should. I think if you can achieve more, you should. I think like we're so much more capable than I think what we are maybe led to believe growing up. And I think it would be a waste for me not to try and push for more. Like if I can and I can put energy into it, like why wouldn't I? Cool, it's hard, but I feel like doing nothing is also hard. Like having a pretty normal life, normal level of income, very, maybe not having an impact. I'm sure it would be fine, but it's just not what I want. I feel like there's always there's always more that you can do. And I think if you can do it, you should do it.
And for you, what's the North Star?
Longevity, probably, because something that I've noticed a lot from like the online coaching space or even the fitness space in general, it's quite a natural progression and you've done the exact same natural progression. You've owned a phenomenal fitness business, and then that's slowly integrated into consultancy and coaching, and then it's like a business coaching business. And I think that's a path that so many people take, and it's not necessarily the path that I wanted. So I think for me, longevity with having a online coaching company that solely serves fitness people, based solely on the fact that most people progress and try and move into something else. And maybe that's what I should do. But most people do that. And I kind of just want to see what will happen in 15 years' time of having the same company. So there's an element of like stubbornness of maybe I could have coached coaches. People have asked me to do that side of things. It's not for me. I don't get fulfillment out of that. I don't necessarily enjoy it. Clearly not the same way, like the passion that you have for this, like oozes out of you for like helping other coaches. I've just not had that, and I've tried it at certain points, but for me, it's more to own my own online coaching company for like a long fucking time and just naturally see what happens, because time, providing that you're not wasting that time, time's like the time spent doing one thing can almost always just be positive in my mind.
And do you think you've always been entrepreneurial and had that like business, like kind of fight in spirit? Or do you think you've had to kind of, that's been developed over time?
Developed for sure. Like I mean, I've been coaching for 10 years and on the gym floor for I think five of those, five or six. And I remember one of my clients actually got me into the kind of entrepreneurial space. He owned pizza shops of all things. Phenomenal businessman, like owned like pizza shops and bars like locally in Glasgow. He done really well. He was always like, you can do more than just have 20 in-person clients. He says, what about online? And at the time I was like, for me, when I first started in online coaching, because online coaching is new, like online coaching is like a maybe 10 years old, but like in the popular sense, it's like 5 or 6 years old that it's like become a popular job. And at the time I was like, nah, like online coaching's for bodybuilders. Like that's the only people that I seen doing online coaching. So I kind of shot that idea down, and then he spoke to me a little bit more about personal development, certain books. The first personal development book I tried to read was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which is like a monstrous book. So I got like halfway through it, I got some bits from it, and then I was like, kind of opened up my mind to like what was possible. But being an entrepreneur was never the goal. I suppose initially I was just like, I just want to do a job that I enjoy. I've seen a lot of people around me, friends, family, go to uni for 7 years, do all these things, and then they fucking hated their job. And I was like, nah, I'm just gonna take a little bit of time, figure out what I want to do. My main thing was like job fulfillment, which I had, and I've almost always had across the last 10 years. So I'm like forever grateful for that. But no, I think for me it was like drip fed. I was like, that's possible. Oh, that's possible. I can manage my own, I can make this, I can do it. Right, okay. So it was kind of like, it was a slow process. It wasn't a case of, I watched my family be entrepreneurs and I was like, I must do this. I didn't necessarily have that. Don't get me wrong, my granda was quite a successful businessman. He owned a garden centre of all things. But it wasn't until I was older that I appreciated what he had. I kind of just thought he had a job when I was growing up. I didn't see him as a business owner. I just seen him as like someone that worked hard. So no, it was very it was a slow burn. Like it was 5 years of being a coach before I viewed it as a business, I would have said.
Firstly, don't tell Leanne that your granddad owns garden centers, because mate, she will be all over that like beans on
Yeah.
toast. It's weird. I feel like when you're younger, you don't appreciate a garden center, and then you reach a certain age. I'm like, me and Leanne went to a garden center a couple of weeks ago, and we're like walking around. It's like it was like when you were a kid and you used to walk around like Woolworths on a Saturday and just picking your pick and mix. Like, oh, what about this plant? Oh, what about this plant? You got on this plant? You're like, when did this even become a thing? And then you're like, how much is this tree? Like it's
Plant pots. Yeah, it's like £200 plant pots. Kirsty wants 2 plant pots for the front door, and I'm like, nah, we're going to B&M. We're not going to some fancy garden centre. But yeah, it's funny how you just naturally transition into like, oh, like home stuff, like cookware. Oh, pots and pans. Like, when does that happen?
Oh, that's when you know you're growing up. What challenges do you feel as though you faced by going down this path and almost like choosing that route that was almost like an alternative to the norm, I suppose?
Um, I suppose, I think a lot of people might say things like stability here. I've always felt fairly stable, and I don't know if it's just because I've been quite confident in my ability to sell and to make enough. Like, I've always been confident to make enough money to like survive and do the right things and whatever else. But I wouldn't have said that. That's what I would presume is a typical challenge. I think my biggest challenge is I've actually just like you asked a minute ago, what's your North Star? Like figuring out what that is, and still even the answer I gave you was pretty vague there. Like figuring out what the long game is, figuring out what the because I always think like, am I really going to be online coaching people at 45 and 50? And I might be, and that might be the case. Like I said, it's a relatively new career to an extent. That's definitely been a challenge, thinking about future proofing and what does it look like in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? Because I think with a lot of careers, whether you're a lawyer or a doctor or these kind of, more conventional to an extent careers, there's always that like ladder. I think with entrepreneurship, yeah, you could say the ladder is just make more money. That is, of course, a ladder that you can aim for, but figuring out what that is for me, because of course there's a financial, there's financial goals that I have and there's things that I want to reach, but I don't think that's all that drives me. I think the biggest challenge is figuring out what drives you. And I think what drives me now, actually, I suppose I'm at a bit of a crossroad right now, thinking about, well, what is it that drives me now? Because back in the day, it was the house, the car, the reputation, the client numbers. I'm like, I've got a lot of those things. I've achieved the, on paper material success. And now it's like, well, what do I want now? I think that's probably my biggest challenge right now, actually. So maybe you can give me some therapy and help me, but that's probably where I'm at with that.
Mate, I think it's so good to explore that, because I think you do get to a point where you almost do go, right, okay, now what? And I think it's almost a great question that I've been living within. Is like, how do I want to live versus how do I achieve more?
Yeah.
And I think when you do that, and I wrote something down a little while ago, and it was like, right, okay, Joe, what are you currently optimizing for? Like, what are you optimizing for here? Because you could do X, you could do Y, and you could do Z, and you now know that you've got the tenacity, the grit, the stubbornness, and you would just now go and do that. But it's like, is that actually now what you want? And what are you
Yeah.
willing to compromise and sacrifice to get there? And how do you want to feel? And what is it that you're really looking for with this, and what's driving that? And I think for me, it's always this like appropriate curiosity of like how good I could be, and
Yeah.
looking at it through the lens of going, right, okay, when I look at myself as like an 18, 19-year-old man, hopefully I get that opportunity to experience being that age. It's that looking back with like no regrets, and now knowing that I kind of left it all out there and on the table. And I think when you look at it through obviously the financial metric, I shared this with the coaches the other day. It's like, if you build a business entirely around the sole focus of making money, you're always going to feel skinned. It's a bit like if you spend the entirety of your time trying to spend all of your time in the gym trying to build a body to be able to please others, you're always going to feel dissatisfied.
Yeah.
So it's looking at, okay, once you then, but I believe you have to do that to get to a certain point to then realize, okay, now what? And then that's a whole new world that you start to open yourself up to, that's then this like curiosity and this exploration, because you're now able to view things from a different place.
Yeah, I think self-awareness is another challenge as well, because like you said there, sometimes I've had goals and I maybe didn't have the self-awareness. I was just aimlessly going for these things. I was like, these sound like good goals, X amount of money, whatever it is, material goals. And then when I became a little bit more self-aware, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, because now I'm like, well, why do I want that? And then I'll go like, oh, maybe I don't want that. And then I'm like, well, what do I want? So it's like trying to figure out like what you want, but also I think why you want it. Because I think just wanting things is fine, and wanting things can get you started. But I think when you actually start peeling back the layers and go, well, why do I want that? Is it status? Is it respect? Is it, for something that, I didn't get respect for when I was younger, or whatever else? Is it to please someone else? Because I think like that's sometimes an okay reason. Is it just to be like a, fuck you to someone else? That's sometimes a powerful driver. Or is it to impress someone that you're trying to impress? Equally, that's been a driver for me at a lot of various stages. Not necessarily right now. I don't feel the same need for that sort of like status as I did when I was growing and when I was like growing up. But I think like what you're driven by changes so much throughout like various phases of like running a business or entrepreneurship. Like it's always going to change like what you want to get. I know when I have kids, that's going to be the driver. Like I know that like that's just going to happen. But it's thinking about, well, what do you want and why do you want it and why do you want that now, and will that change at some point as well?
I think it's being okay with not fully knowing as well, and then just having this like experimental mentality of just now going, do you know what? I'm just going to go and experiment, be curious, and I'm going to go and figure it out. Because if you don't go there, I think sometimes you can spend so much time like thinking and planning, and then trying to look at, right, okay, well, what's this pathway? But then ultimately, the only way that you're going to now be able to gain evidence around more of what you want and less of what you don't want is going to be evidence of you
Yeah,
now going and trying a lot of stuff and going, yeah, that worked. No, that didn't work. And also now knowing, well, okay, these are the edges that I'm bumping up against. Do you know what? This is
yeah,
what I thought that I wanted. Or once I got to this point, then I thought I would feel this way, or I'd have these things. But actually, in hindsight, upon reflection, actually, do you know what? Like, these are the steps I now need to take laterally to then be able to then move forwards again. I think it's just being okay with just having that like experimental scientist approach to, do you know what? Let's just fuck about and find out to some degree, and then just trust your own intuition of what feels right. Because I
yeah.
think otherwise you end up getting caught up in the weeds because you're trying to be too detailed and locked in on the micro and having absolutely everything dialed in, which I think can almost then be a bit of a curse, because it stops you from then actually just going and opening yourself
Yeah.
up to, let's see.
I think you need to like. I think me and you have probably read a lot of the same sort of personal development books and listened to a lot of the same people. And growing up, it was always, don't chase material success and don't do these things. But I actually think if you're a young guy, you've got an ego, you're going to chase those things naturally. I think do chase them. I always thought like, these people are wrong. When I get it, I will be happy. When I get it, I will be fulfilled. When I get it, I will feel better. But I think you need to get it to realize that it's maybe not the be all and end all. And I think that's okay. I think chasing material success is completely fine short term. I think you need to do it. I think you need to do it at an earlier stage in your, I suppose, entrepreneurial journey to then go, okay, it's actually not what it's cracked out to be. You can't read that in a book. You can't like get that from somebody telling you like it's not important. The car is not important. The house isn't that important. It's like, well, I'm gonna do it anyway and achieve it, and then I can decide for myself.
I think the best, sometimes the best lessons have to now be experienced in order for them to be understood. And
100%.
I think it's okay to be driven by ego. And then I think it's, but then also at the same time, you need to be able to go, well, what does my heart want? What do I actually now want? And actually recognize that there's always going to be that blend between the two. And go back to what you said earlier, it's just literally having that kind of level of self-awareness, obviously surrounding that, which I think is huge. What have been some of the biggest hardships that you feel as though you've been through with this growth and this evolution of one-man band to now growing a team and now the position that you find yourself in?
I think for me, like when I started MTN coaching, it was very much me and two other coaches that I was very much taking under my wings. I think that the biggest struggles that I probably faced is getting people on, getting good coaches on board that don't maybe have the same, not don't have the same entrepreneurial drive, but they need you to an extent, but I don't know how to word it. Getting people to stay in a sense, once you give them all the tools that they've got that you've used for you to grow your own business, for them to not just take those tools and go and do their own thing. I suppose that's probably one of the biggest struggles with like growing a team of online coaches. It's very hard because I'll pretty much just, I don't have secrets. I'll just tell you exactly what I done for them to then take all those tools but continue to work in and grow your brand, and for them to not go, well, I've got the tools that David used, I can do my own thing. And I've had that and I'll continue to get that, and that's fine. That's just business. I'm not one of these people that are naive to the fact that people come and go through businesses. It's like a cycle. Yeah, most people, the people that are working even with you right now will not be the same people in 10 years. And I think learning to be okay with that was like a struggle. And like initially when it first happens, I'm sure it was the same with you, and you've got a team member and they leave off their own accord and you're like, fuck, this is the worst thing ever. Like they're gonna take my secrets and do their own thing. And then being okay with that, I suppose that was one of the biggest hardships or struggles with transitioning from just being myself into running a team. Next up, just realizing that you've got more of a responsibility. You're not necessarily in charge. Like all of my coaches are subcontracted, so I'm not in charge of their income, but I can directly affect their income by doing certain things, positive and negative. I think being aware of that's a big thing, and realizing like one of my coaches has just texted me an amazing text. He's just got his dream house, and he's like, I could not have done this without working within the brand and working working alongside you for the last 3 years, and realizing that you've got that responsibility, positive or negative, because he could have texted me saying, fuck you, this has been a horrendous 3 years. I've not got the house I wanted because of you. But no, he sent me a proper nice message in the sense of like, this is part of this has happened because of you. Like, I think realizing you've got that responsibility and to kind of uphold that standard in that sense as well. And then I suppose that the third thing that I've certainly struggled with from a leadership standpoint or from a management standpoint is being able to lead when you're struggling to lead yourself. Now, I'm never someone that struggled particularly with mental health, but like anyone, I've got up and down periods throughout my year. One of the biggest things I struggle with and still continue to struggle with is trying to lead a team of people when I'm struggling to lead myself. When I've got those weeks or months where I'm not particularly motivated, when I've got those weeks or months where I'm not that inspired to, put the work in and graft. I've found that particularly hard, even as of quite recently. Being able to try and inspire a team of 9, 10, 11 coaches when you're like, fuck, I feel like a fraud because I don't feel particularly inspirational right now.
And in those moments, how do you manage those emotions and what do you do?
Badly. Badly, but better than I have in the past. I think in the past I would quite literally bury my head in the sand and be like, guys, like things are on a bit of a maintenance mode right now. I think I would not necessarily tell the team how I was feeling, like when I was having those weeks or months. But even recently, like before we jumped on the podcast, we were chatting, like I was unwell for a few weeks, and it just stopped all kind of momentum that I had in my life, from training, from business, from it just kind of put a pause on everything for like 4 or 6 weeks, which it's a lot, like it feels like forever when you're in the kind of the depths of it. But yeah, I wasn't feeling good mentally, and in the past I would have just, probably not spoke to anyone about it, probably not told the team. But this time around, I actually just had a meeting and I says, look, guys, like I am struggling to lead you right now. I know that you maybe aren't seeing that type thing, but I'm struggling to lead you right now. I just want to be open. I want to be honest with how I'm feeling. I know this will pass. I've felt like this before. It's been a week or two. This was a little bit longer, but I was just a little bit more open and honest. And I think they appreciated that. I think they appreciated a little bit of vulnerability coming from, I suppose, the leader of MTN, to be like, fuck, he feels like that too. Because I'm quite bad for, some of the coaches in the past have been dealing with stuff, and I've been like, oh, you'll be fine, you'll get through it. Because I'd not necessarily had that really low moment, and I'd not felt like that. So it was good from an empathy perspective and for understanding how others have felt as well.
What was the fear that you had around communicating that?
Looking lack of respect, probably. Lack of respect, and I feel, and I still do feel this. I feel like the person at the top, the person leading, should be, should be more competent. Should always have that level of, inspiration and drive. But that's not realistic. I think if you look at any sort of high performer, there's dips. Like there's always going to be dips in motivation, mindset, inspiration, like guidance. There's periods where you love to lead, and there's periods where you're like, fuck, like I'm struggling to lead myself. Therefore, leading others is tough. And I've always used this from a fat loss perspective. Like trust comes from like competence to an extent. And I feel obviously our company's built around like body composition and body transformation results. Taking that sort of advice from someone that's not been through it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. Therefore, like sometimes leading people when you can't lead yourself, to me, it doesn't make sense. I'm like, I can't lead anyone else because I'm struggling to do the things that I need to do. So I suppose it's that whole, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I just took a step back and says, look, guys, give me 2 or 3 weeks. I need to get myself back on track. I need to tick off my positive boxes. I need to do the things that are going to make me feel good, that are going to fill me back up. And then I'm back, and I feel back. I'm back today. So,
Mate, I love that. I take 2 things from that. Number one, culture is how we do things. And number one, like the first thing is actually when you look at it through that lens, it's like actually as a leader, if you can now open up, be vulnerable, be open around where you are and actually just expose yourself. But exposing yourself feels like a risk because actually you're letting people in. There's a great quote in one of Tim Ferriss's books in the 4 Hour Workweek is like, if you feel like you're walking down the road completely naked, it's like you might just be like getting it right, something along those lines. And it's like it is when you open up like that, you're like, oh, because you feel as though that there's this persona and this role that you now have to be able to embody, and this is who you need to be, and this is how you need to behave. But actually, again, when you look at it from a cultural perspective, if you can communicate and you can convey that, actually, it just creates a more collaborative space that allows other people to be able to open themselves up, which makes them feel listened to, heard, understood, and there's that greater sense of safety and belonging. I think the other thing is, mate, like you're building even from the message that you just communicated from the guy who just now got his dream house, like you're building other leaders.
yeah.
And so when actually like you're now in a position in a place where I'm not a 100%, you've now got 9, 10, 11 people that are around you that are all now leaders that now embody what you do, how you do things. And now I've got the confidence and the capacity and also the opportunity to now be able to step up. And so I think actually it's a great thing because in those moments, if you remove yourself, it's then actually, okay, how does the business run?
Yeah.
What level of decisions get made? What breaks? What works? And I think that actually is a real great space, but I think it can be quite difficult. I mean, speaking for myself, is like that letting go and relinquishing control because you feel as though you have to I'm carrying the boat. And it's actually being okay with just stepping away from that and actually giving them the chance to be able to step up. And I think that also determines how much of a good leader you are when actually you're in the shit and you're in the challenge. Actually, how does everything else continue to push and progress on?
Yeah, and I think like we touched on the start on how, I'm very, what's next, progress, it must be doing this. But sometimes like progress is also being able to maintain when you're not feeling your best. because in the past, my business wouldn't have maintained when I wasn't working like on it all of the time. But the fact that for 4 to 6 weeks there, I probably worked at about 20% capacity. I got the essentials done in the morning, and then that was me for the day. For honestly, like 4 or 6 weeks there, like I was in a not an insanely bad place, but like it was maintenance mode. And the fact that we made it through 6 weeks of maintenance mode, and there was no refunds, there was no huge drop off in revenue. Did we grow massively? No, but sometimes maintenance can be a level of growth if it proves to you that your systems are right, you've got the right team in place, and everything actually ran pretty smoothly, whilst the guy at the top was maybe not where he wanted to be. So that was like a little bit of I suppose, a confidence boost in the sense of like, shit, like, okay, if that happens again, we're okay. I don't want it to happen again. I'm sure it will, but if that happens again, like we're fine. Like the business didn't collapse. No one left. We're all good.
I said to the guys the other day, and I was speaking to Ben about this, is like, I think you have 3 stages. You grow capacity, sustain capacity, and scale capacity. Grow capacity is how can I do as much stuff as I possibly can, and then you get to a point where you really find your edge, and you're like, oh, I'm not sure how much more I can then do. Sustain capacity is, right, okay, how can I become more efficient where I'm currently at so that I can create some space to now be able to kind of grow into. Scale capacity is how can I now leverage other people's capacity to now be able to, as a collaborative, to now be able to like ascend. And I think, again, mate, for you, it's that place and that space of like, it feels like uncharted territory, because for the first time, or maybe for another time, but maybe not to that level of severity or duration, it's like you're letting go of the rope. And then other people are actually now kind of grabbing that. And for you to be able to just take that step back and realize, actually, okay, like you've got to be able to sit within that to go, like you spoke about earlier, I'm safe, I'm okay, I'm good. And actually getting the goalpost to stop moving for a period of time and challenging yourself to almost do less is actually harder and more difficult than actually just going and doing more, because that's easy for you and me.
Yeah, totally. No, I'm totally on board with that. It was proof that things can run without me always being 100%, which was a nice feeling.
When it comes to hiring and bringing in team, what do you look for, and how have you found that process? And also for you now going from, I'm the face of the brand, because this is a big challenge I speak to a lot of coaches around. It's like, well, if they're not getting coached by me, then what they, and there's almost that friction. How did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think I've struggled and I've changed how I've done things, and I probably will continue to change and learn. Like we've had probably 12 or 13 or 14 coaches over the last 4 years, and there's currently 9 of us. So there's been a kind of core 5 or 6 of us, and there's been a few people that have kind of come in, done their own thing, whatever else. More recently, I've hired more for customer service than anything, than skill on coaching, because I feel like skill on coaching is very learnable. I feel like how people approach people, how people speak to people, how people interact with people is a much harder thing for me to teach necessarily. Can it be taught 100%? But a lot of that's ingrained from how you've been brought up, your influences growing up, things like that. When it comes to skill of like figuring out macros and reducing calories and a fat loss phase, like that can be delivered in a manual. It can be delivered via video. With regards to how to greet people when you meet them, how to say hello on a phone, like these things are kind of a little bit more, yes, they're teachable, but they're a lot more ingrained in you. So as of late, I've kind of the coaches that I've hired more recently have been a little bit more on personality than necessarily skill, because I think the skill side of things is very teachable. When it comes to fitness, like what we do is not rocket science. I'm aware of that. Like what we do is not that complicated. I believe most people can learn it. In fact, most of our clients learn it to the extent of they don't need us forever, which is great. Like I actually like that aspect of things. So that's probably where I've been more recently. I used to just be like, oh, do I like you? Which I still think needs to be an element. Like I think with the size of the company, it's super small. It's like under 20 people. It needs to be like, do you enjoy working with these people? I think that needs to be a huge element. But again, I've made loads of mistakes. Like 3 of my best mates currently work within the brand. That's got its ups and downs. That's probably a mistake looking back and whatever else. Equally, for the last 4 years, it's been phenomenal. Like there's been so many amazing times. It does create other challenges, but I'll be completely upfront. I don't have a process for hiring. It's very ad hoc. Like, do I like you? Have you got some good soft skills? Is there some knowledge and information there as well?
I think if somebody's got the will, you can
Yeah,
develop the skill. But I think if
totally.
someone has the skill but they haven't got the will, and I think as well, it's like, do they fit into the culture? You know, do they
Yeah.
have similar values? Do they uphold similar standards? And if they have those things, then I think it's obviously easy because then all they see, all the other things can be molded. Whereas if you're hiring purely on skill, but you know that doesn't fit, well, they could be the best expert in the world within their field or domain. It's not going to align. And how have you found the transition of then being able to build the brand, bringing coaches, and it then being less about you?
Yeah. Initially, like you said, I think the last question was a little bit more centered around like, do people not just want me? And initially, yes, it was like, oh, I've hired 2 coaches. They're like, I don't want to work with the coaches. I want to work with you. That was a struggle. I got over that largely by still being quite heavily involved with those client journeys. So I would actually join group chats and I would be in. My WhatsApp is like nuts. I used to be in like 50 group chats with one of the coaches and their client, 50 group chats with the other coach and client, and then I'd manage between 50 and 80 of my own clients. So like my WhatsApp, I honestly think I have like 4,500 contacts from like just working with so many like coaches and clients. But that was kind of how I managed that initially, so that I could be like, no, I'm still here, like I'm still heavily involved. In reality, I was, checking some messages now and then, and I was making sure things were ticking over, but there was very little involvement. But it was to kind of show that I was still there if the client needed me. With regards to the brand growing, yeah, I mean, like if you even if you were to look on the MTN like Instagram account for any length of time, it's not just about me now. There's a huge collection of coaches and clients and community and other people. And in fact, it would maybe take you a little bit of time to figure out like who owns it. And that's kind of what I wanted, because I used to be so obsessed with like growing my own personal brand, and I think I actually need to get a little bit more obsessed with that again. But I think from the company perspective, not necessarily knowing who is it, it gives us a little bit of like, I suppose it makes the brand look a little bit bigger. Then it's just David's company, and it's not like it's my name, because for a year and a half it was just like I had coaches that worked under David Hatt personal training, and it's like, and I think you were you similar with
Mine
JB.
was no, it was J Physique and then it was Team J Physique. So it was kind of, yeah.
So it becomes hard because the coaches also feel an element of like, oh, I'd rather work for a brand than to work for someone's name, if that makes sense. So that's some advice if anyone's growing a team. I would say maybe don't do it under just your name. Like that's something that I've benefited from. Like when we switched to MTN, the coaches got more bought in because they were like, oh, we're part of this bigger thing. We're not just part of David Hatt's cronies. But also clients feel like they're part of like something that little bit bigger as well than just, coach name training, because that's what mine was. Mine was just D Hat training, and then I had coaches within that. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question there, but
I think you're building a club, you're building a culture. This is what we stand for. This is what it represents. This is what it means. And I think about this, like even with football, it's like you're playing for the badge,
yeah,
like you're playing for the badge. And what that badge means is obviously it has a story, it has a heritage, it has obviously so much behind it. And ultimately, everybody's now playing for that same badge. And it's not just about one sole person. But go back to what you said earlier around team and obviously them having a vision and they get what they need and then they now leave. And it's like, how can you create a vision that's so big that basically their vision sits within that? So that they're ultimately now feeling as though they're progressing, they're growing, they're exploring, they're getting better, and they're having their needs and their values met. And obviously their vision is in alignment with then this big overarching vision, so that again, that capacity can come together. And I think it's such a hard thing to be able to create, because people, like when you're trying to deal and manage and lead people, obviously it's forever changing, evolving and growing. And I think it's such a dynamic role, but also one of the most difficult things you can do, but also one of the most rewarding. And I think if you can get that right, then the impact that can have has been huge. From what I can see and what I understand, one of the biggest factors of your success has actually been client fulfillment, client service, and then referrals. How much focus have you put on customer and client fulfillment over marketing and sales? And which one do you believe has had the biggest effect on the scalability of your company?
Yeah, I mean, product first or service first for us has always been like quite literally one of our values is customer service first. And it's very, that might be quite corporate sounding, but the more that I've focused on just the client result, the client service, what did they get? What are the features? What are the benefits? The more I've focused on that, the less I've had to sell. I can probably count on one hand, maybe not one hand. I can count on all 20 digits how many sales calls I've been on in the last 3 years. We don't necessarily, we've never had to really hard sell people. It's very much like, oh, I've heard of this. My friend got an amazing result. They've told me all about it. Sign me up type thing. So we've always focused, like, I mean, I see a lot of coaches focus big on cold outreach and loads of money into ads. And I think all of those things have a place, but I think if the product's not there, it's like, pouring water into a bucket with holes in it. Like, yeah, people will come in, but they're going straight back out if the product and the service isn't there. So customer service has always been so, and I actually don't know where that comes from. I don't know if I've had bad experience with customer service growing up that I've thought, fuck, I never want that to happen. I've certainly had, business mentors in the past that I've maybe not got what I wanted from. So that's kind of created, bad taste. I'm like, I never want someone to feel that with my brand, with my company. Equally, so many people have always came to us off the back of having a bad experience with a coach. And I'm like, I think I've got that. There's probably a status thing. Like, I don't want anyone to have that experience with us. And will they? I'm sure people didn't like an aspect of certain things. Like, you can't cater to everyone, but we've always focused very heavily on providing something a little bit different, but just, from a communication standpoint, just providing more. Like, the amount we communicate with our clients probably isn't great from a organization standpoint, but for like business growth and client fulfillment, like, it's been phenomenal.
I say this all the time, like relationships and buy-in are absolutely huge. Like, you can't just coach the process, you have to coach the person. And that's the thing that allows them to connect with you, allows them to go on a journey with you. And when there's the valleys and the challenges, that's where there's that sense of safety and belonging. Whereas when there's just a process that they're following, it's like, well, they just disconnect. And I think that becomes then the lifeblood of the business and becomes the heartbeat. And then, mate, as you've seen, obviously the capacity to be able to scale and grow has now been built on obviously those things, which is absolutely phenomenal. How do you ensure those standards are met across all team members? What have been some of the principles or things you put in place to ensure that from a standard operating procedure is now very much in place?
Again, this is one of the kind of hurdles and obstacles that I've learned the hard way, because there's been plenty of coaches that have come in. I've taught them what I thought, this is what you need, go away and do it. And I've maybe not followed up with, are you doing these things? And I think constant reminders, like, we have two team meetings like every single week. They're only like 30 minutes, but like Monday and Thursday every single week. And a lot of the time it's just banging on the same things. And I say to them, like, guys, you've heard this before, but this is what we need to be doing. So from an SOP standpoint, like, one of the things I spoke on, like, I used to join the group chats with all of the clients. There's 700 people now. Like, I do not do that now, but that used to be how I kind of manage that. Nowadays it's more of a case of like, in our one-to-ones with the coaches, it's a case of like, pull up your WhatsApp. I want to have a quick look through some conversations. Don't do that too regularly. I like to give most of the coaches a lot of like trust and leeway with that. But yeah, I mean, that's somewhere it's always going to be hard, because for me, it's my highest value, but it's not necessarily all of the team's highest values all of the time. So it's something that I think consistent touch points to be like, look, the highest value is making sure these clients are communicated with, making sure you're building a relationship. That's how I feel. Does that mean all of the team feel that all of the time? Probably not. No. It's something that I need to do better for sure. Like, uphold those standards, like, more. How I do that is tough without going through. Cool. Pull up 50 conversations. I'm gonna have a look through. It's tough to do that, but I think just hammering home the importance to the team. Like, this is why it's so important. Like, we've not had to spend lots of money on ads. Why? Because we've been so good at fulfilling that client's needs so that they tell their friends. Like, organic marketing in that sense and getting referrals is the #1 way to grow a business. And it's why we've been, 4 or 5 years into business now and not necessarily had to run ads to fill a 500-person program. So like, it's how we've managed to do that. And it's based on the fact that we've built these relationships and we've built these referrals and we have processes in place to get more people on board and to get more people bought in for the long term.
You've taken this exactly where I was gonna steer this next, because I think some people will look at the launch that you did at the beginning of this year and go, 500 people organically through a launch into a 12-week kind of photo shoot challenge. What are all the different strategies and approaches, and what are all the marketing and sales tactics that you use to able to get that volume of people through the door? How much did you spend on ads and all of those good things? Mate, talk me through some of the real kind of, I know you've already done so, but like real basic principles that you believe were so integral in the success of now being able to get that amount of people through into a program organically.
Yeah. I think one of the things is it wasn't 500 quite. I didn't hit my target.
You've got to be in your bonnet. Just to let you know, like when we went for dinner,
Four,
this is the first. Yeah, mate. It was
yeah,
that was it.
four,
I was going to sign up. I was going to sign up 4 times just to get it to 500 for you.
yeah, get the full team on board. 486, unfortunately, but next year 500. I think one of the things is realizing that the programs now. So the 12-week peaks are a big all sing and all dance and summer fat loss program. It's 4 years old, so there's an element of it's not a new thing. It's a thing that's been about a while. It's a thing that's been refined. It's a product that's been consistently improved and consistently changed. Like that's a big part of it that people maybe go, oh, but I've launched my own group coaching program and it got 30 people. I'm like, yeah, but I've done it for 4 years. That's definitely an aspect. Time served is a massive thing. Like I've said, that's an aspect. I think the fact that there was 9 coaches pushing it. Wrong. A lot of that, I'll discuss that in a second. But there was 9 coaches pushing the program. So if you break that down alone and think, well, if 9 coaches bring 50 people, you're there or thereabouts anyway. Okay, that makes it a little bit more easy to understand. But if I'm being honest, the superstar in all this is my copywriter. The email marketing team, like Chris at the Savage Scholars, phenomenal. If anyone's looking for email marketing, please check out Chris. But he's been an integral part of MTN's growth in general, but email marketing is where we do the vast majority. Like of those 486, I think like 73% came through email. Everyone thinks it's social media. Like we post a lot on socials, don't get me wrong, but the vast majority came through email. And again, with email, it's playing the long game. I've had that email list 5 years. It's sitting at like 11,000 people, and that's with constant cleanups and getting people out and keeping new people coming back in. But a big aspect of the numbers and the volume was email marketing for sure, but also not selling to people every single fucking week. Like we are big on lightning strikes is what I like to call them. And it's like 3 or 4 big things per year, pour everything into it. The people that are maybe, you know, advertising and promoting every day, every week, every month, cool. I'm sure there is people that have success with that, but people don't love consistently being sold to. People like a bit of a break. People like to be, you know, just value added. It's the Gary Vaynerchuk jab hook. Like spend more time jabbing and then hit the big hook. We're the exact same. It's like value. By the way, we've got something to sell. So I think that's a big thing. If I was to pinpoint the key things, there's 9 coaches promoting it. I think that's one of them. I think the fact that it's 4 years old is a second thing. Email marketing is going to be the third. And I think if I was to look at the fourth thing, I actually don't think we've got a competitor. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of people say this, but I truly believe the 12-week peak is in a category of one. Is there summer fat loss challenges? Yes. Is there 12-week shreds? Yes. Is there all these things ran by thousands of different coaches? Yes. But I don't think there's anything that does everything that we do, from the prizes and sending people to Jamaica and Mexico and Cancun, all inclusive. The prizes is one thing. We've got a free fitness photo shoot that's got between 200 and 400 people. We've got a black tie ball at the end of it. There's a meetup every single weekend. Like there's so many different elements that, like, yeah, maybe your group coaching program does a training plan and, you know, has nutrition advice, but does it have all these facets? Probably not. Probably not. Maybe there is someone watching this thinking, fuck you, David. I have that. Why don't I have 500 people? But I think we sell in a category of one. It's not just a fat loss program.
I love that, dude. Final question. What have you changed your mind on recently?
What have I changed my mind on recently? I'm trying to think from when I was in my depths of despair, what I've been thinking about.
Don't go to Paris. Don't go to Paris and eat
Don't
whatever you
eat,
like.
don't eat frogs legs and don't eat raw burgers because you'll have a stomach bug for 2 weeks.
Mate, that's one way to do a 12-week shred.
5 kilo. Do you know what? Actually, this relates to something that I done at the weekend. What have I changed my mind on recently? I think like it'll sound cliche, like mind over matter. I've always known that your mind's a bit stronger than your body, but I done a marathon last weekend with like zero prep, zero training, and it was very much to build more integrity back in myself. Like I felt that there was a few weeks where I was saying I was going to do things and not doing them, and saying I was going to do things and not doing them. And I think sometimes you just need more proof in your life. And sometimes it's fine to just do something ridiculous, and sometimes it's fine to just do something that's a little bit out there to build that like trust back. I always thought it was like, you know, integrity comes from doing those little things and building up, and I think it still does. But I think there's an element of sometimes just fucking do something mad and just prove to yourself that you can do it. I think sometimes what you get from that is massive. And I know from just running that at the weekend there and not being prepared and doing it, I think like the self-trust that I rebuilt overnight from doing that was like was a huge thing.
It almost shows you once again what you're capable of and what's possible, and then it actually allows you. Then it's almost like a lightning strike. What you just said earlier, it's like that. Right, okay, big jolt, or right, okay, bang, back in, recover from that, and it's like actually I've still got it within me, and that's that rebirth of energy.
Yeah, for sure, man. I needed it.
Class, mate, so good, absolutely incredible, dude. It's been an absolute pleasure. Just so the listeners can go and follow, see what you're up to, and go and explore if they want to do so. Where's the best place to go?
Instagram is probably where we post the most, so just at MTN Coaching. If you want to follow my personal, it's just at dhat_MTN. My second name is Hat. A lot of people think my name's Matt, by the way. Loads of people reach out being like, hey Matt.
David Matt.
I'm like, it's David Hatt, and they're like, oh right, I thought it was Matt. So yeah, dhat_MTN. And to clarify on this, MTN doesn't stand for mountain. Everyone thinks it's mountain coaching because our logo also looks like a fucking mountain. Mindset training nutrition is actually what it stands for.
Dude, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm looking forward to whining and dining with you again very, very soon. And mate, thank you for your time and wisdom as always.
Nice one, man. Appreciate it.